When you come into the world, we take on the identity of those who are more powerful than us. What we're looking for is a kind of person who is looking for meaning. What's the meaning of life? Why am I here?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sunday Conversation. The topic today, you're going to love this, the will of God. I'm David Masters, and I'm going to launch into this topic and do what they call the deep dive. It's an intense topic. In a sense, it's frightening. You ever think about what God has for you? I know it's often on my mind. And paramount to that answer is, what is God's will for me? What is God's will for everyone? So, the scripture has a lot of answers to every question. But I'm just going to launch into this because this is, in my opinion, the authority. Okay? For all, this is 1 John 2:16 and 17. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and the pride in possessions, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. So, let's break it down. The things that we want. The people we're involved with. The possessions that we work so hard to acquire and own. There's a whole school of thought called the law of attraction. I'm sure you're familiar with that, where you attract what you think. So you put your mind on the things of the world and, okay, things of the world start to come your way. But you focus your mind on the things of God, well, that's not as tangible as the things of the world. God's will is actually a very quiet knowing that comes to you when you clear a path for it. Okay. So that's 1 John 2:16 and 17. The things of the world are passing away. Hebrews 4:12. For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing the division of soul and spirit, of joints and of marrow, and discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. That sounds like God to me. Doesn't look at you as a person, as a body, because we're all flawed. We all have human weaknesses. And because God is just, He looks past the human. And He looks to your thoughts and to the intentions of your heart. And the intentions are this. When you have opportunity to do the wrong thing, what do? Now, I've said many times before, I may not always know what's right. As a matter of fact, I can never always know what's right. No one can. But I almost always know what's wrong. So when temptation comes your way, this is God's way of finding out who you are. And this is His way of knowing you through your thoughts and your intentions. And there are all kinds of little things, including right down to the food we eat. The intentions of, what do I want to do with my temple? How do I want to treat my body? How long do I want it to last? Do I want to indulge it for the sweet sensation? Or do I want to fast? Because I know those things are not good for me. Just watch yourself. You could see how the ebb and flow of thoughts and intentions. Sometimes you give in, you eat a donut, and you go, ugh, I wish I wouldn't have done that. So the next time comes around, and the question is, are you going to do it again? It's as simple as that, really. Because here's the thing, if you can tackle the little things, if you can watch and see the little things that are tempting you, it gets more and more difficult. Just like riding a bike when you're a kid. You start, and then later on in life, you might be a mountain biker doing crazy things. But your skill level of dealing with life improves as you watch your own thoughts and your own intentions. So let's go to the way we do that, which we understand is a meditation. Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed. Start again. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Okay, here it is again. Without temptation, you cannot build a relationship with God. You cannot have any virtue. So now we get to this other part of the will of God. Because I believe the will of God has a lot more to do with people than with things. So I don't think the will of God is black and white like some people do. I believe the will of God is, how can I say it? Helps you to adapt to situations in life. Because we don't always know what to do. We don't always know what's right. And we can have a sense of what's wrong. And then we're in between the two. We stand on this ground between what's right and what's wrong all day, every day. Mark 3:35. For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother. Let me read that one again. And let me say it again. This world is about our relationships with other people. And the will of God. How does the will of God influence us in relationship to other people? Now, there's a huge push, which I found rather strange, especially on like ABC. They have these shows like called Modern Family. And it really is like an insane asylum of all kinds of dysfunctional people. And what they do is they kind of show you the quirks and the funniness and the weirdness, and they kind of get you to acclimate to the idea that, well, we're all kind of crazy. And who are we to judge other people? Oh, I agree with that. You shouldn't judge those people. But at the same time, you ask the question, well, who is my family? Who is my real family? For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother. Because I know there are people out there struggling with this issue of, who is my family? I mean, how do we define what is family? Now, I know that a lot of people love to use the word brother. How you doing, brother? More than, hey, sister. Or hey, mom, hey, mother. But the idea that anybody could be your brother, that's maybe true. But we don't know everybody, do we? So I'm going to move to Matthew 7:21 through 23. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name and cast out demons in your name and do many mighty works in your name? And then will I declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. I never knew you. They speak of me with their mouth, but their hearts are far from me. I got to read that one again. Do you see the power of that? The people that are out there clawing and scratching in the modern family world, it's not for us to judge them because, all have fallen short of the glory of God. We're all sinners. But at the same time, how do we organize our mind to serve God, to do His will? Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. So you go across the dial on Sunday morning and you see a lot of people. Personally, some of them have a lot of good to say, I think. One in particular I like is Joyce Myers. I think she's very connected. But a lot of them are what I call money preachers. And they talk very carefully about the Lord. Which is okay. They can do that. And they have huge followings. But at the same time, they're telling people what they want to hear. There are a lot of people who will tell people what they want to hear, but at a certain level, deep down inside, there's something that allows those who don't want to hear to maybe get a glimpse of light. I mean, even Thomas Paine, one of the founding fathers of this country, was rejected by the people of America because he was too honest. So you know what he did? He left this country and he went over and helped them fight the French Revolution. Because they were ready for what he had to say over there. Over here, we were getting soft, and we were falling back into the old comfort zone, the rut. As long as everything was okay, we don't need people telling us the truth like that. My dad was kind of like that for a long time. He really got under people's skin. Because he was saying things that maybe only he was able to say. And I remember, just as an aside, many years ago, I was working on Venice Boulevard. Man comes in with a baseball bat, 6'6", 250 pounds. Where's that man? Where's that Roy Masters? I start shaking. Hold on, I'll go get him. There was plenty of guys there with weapons. I went and I said to my dad, there's a man out there with a baseball bat. He says, hold on, I'll be there in a moment. I walked back out shaking. I said, he's coming out. So, sitting there wondering what's going to happen. Because of you, my dad walks up. Because of you, my wife left me. He says, who are you? You don't have any right to be in my building. Get out of here. Get out. And the guy just went, ah, and he ran out. He ran out of the building. He was in there to try to punish my dad for telling his wife the truth. And it was just a person who listened to him on the radio. And when he confronted that man who was telling that truth, he fell apart. He fell apart. Have you ever had that experience? Any raise of hands? No? Nobody's ever fallen apart when you told them the truth? Yeah. You tell the truth because it has its own power. And God's power and God's will comes through that truth. I have to read it again. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does my Father's will, who is in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and do many mighty works in your name? And then will I declare to them, I never knew you. So we have two families in this world. We have the family of other people who want to do the will of God. And then we have our family. And many of those people are absorbed into the world. And the devil wants the good families. He wants to tear those families apart. So he plants a seed in those families, a thorn bush that grows up within that family and creates misery. And not the will of God, but the will of what's below. And we've seen it. Every one of us has seen it. And when people say, "Oh, why do these things happen to me?" You can't really look at it that way, because it happens to everyone. Because without temptation, you have no claim to virtue. And even going back in to the time of David, King David, Saul wanted to murder him. He wanted to kill him. He chased him down with his armies. Why? Little David, why? Because he killed Goliath, because he followed God's will. He wanted God's will. When he saw the armies of the Philistines, I almost said Philippines, the Philistine, however you say it, and the Jewish nation, and he knew that he could resolve the issue, just him and the giant. And that is a metaphor of life. A metaphor of life, because no matter how big the evil is in the world, when you say, "God, I want to do your will," let me tell you something, there's going to be a giant, a monster that rises up to challenge you. Now, many people will run, and many people will stand and fall. But without this temptation, the virtue cannot be born. We all need temptation. But, see, this is the elusive will of God. What does God want you to do? And I thought to myself, with this subject, when are you not doing the will of God? That's a big question. And you know what came to me? When you're playing God. You can't have both. When you're playing God, and you don't realize you're playing God, you think you're doing the right thing for the right reason. Everyone does, no matter what. But when you're playing God, you are against God's will. And this is the way of the world. This is why there is such a diversity of ideas and belief systems. Each one of you telling you this is the authentic way that God wants you to be. And I'm telling you right now, I'm not reading the Bible so that as to interpret it for you. It speaks for itself. It is self-evident. But I'm reading the Bible because it's thousands of years old. And the wisdom is true. And to take it to heart is the beginning of greater wisdom for you. And when I look for the answers that I need, I do two things. I search the scriptures and I quiet my mind. And I do as Romans 12:2 says, be transformed by the renewing of my mind. It's hard to sit still. It's very hard. It's hard because in the fallen state, we don't know how to stop. You know when you have the fight or flight instinct? Fight. How many reasons are there to fight? A lot of reasons to fight. Thousands and thousands of reasons to fight. How many reasons are there for flight? Thousands of reasons for flight. So we have lived in that world between those two extremes pretty much since the day we're born. We come into this world and we have these natural instincts to fight or flight. We don't have a natural instinct to be still. That's not natural to us. So we have to practice being still. In other words, we have to practice letting go of our own will, and we have to practice listening. Listening, quietly listening, not listening for a voice, and even watching, not watching a particular thing, but watching what's going on up here. Watching and being patient. Now, here's another one. This is a good one. This is 2 Peter 3:9. The Lord is not slow to fulfill his promise, as some count slowness, but is patient toward you, not wishing that any should perish, but all should reach repentance. You see how the will of God is, in a sense, very elusive to us because we're finite creatures. We measure everything. We measure it by how it affects us. And we measure our success in the world by how we affect others. Now, there are people out there who are timid and fearful. And they live in the shadow world of flight. They don't want to create problems. They don't want to have confrontations. I know many people like that. As a matter of fact, I think the lion's share of people are flighters. They just want to get out of the situation. They don't want to have to confront it. I mean, if you look at it, let's just take the military. How many people join the military to fight our enemies? A very small portion of people step up to that plate. They have their own reasons for doing it. Okay? And those reasons may not be wholesome. They want to go out and kill bad guys. But not many people step up to that. A lot of people would say, and you see this happening in Europe and other places, pacifism. Well, if we only give them what they want, they'll leave us alone. See, that's flighters. So the question is, what is the will of God? In all of these things, what is the will of God in destiny? Does God force you to do anything, though? Does his will come upon you as a force? I've never experienced that. His will comes upon me as a knowing of a choice. This is your choice. Choice between this and this. And I'll go back to David when he was being pursued by Saul. One night, he found and he snuck up on the camp and he was sleeping in his tent, Saul. David could have killed him then. But he didn't. He looked at him and he had pity on him and he said, "Not my job. Not my job. Not in my wheelhouse. Not meant to kill this rotten king." God works in mysterious ways. Never the way you expect. And so when I ask you, does God use a force of his will to control human beings? No. The devil does that. The devil is a taskmaster. The devil is a slaver. There was a great movie written by Stephen King called Needful Things. If you haven't seen it, you should. I'll give you a little bit synopsis here. There's this little town in Maine, little quaint little town, and the devil moves in and he has an antique store. And in that antique store, there's something that everyone in the town wants. Doesn't matter what it is. If it's a signed baseball from some famous baseball player, somebody wants that. And the devil, they go into the shop looking curiously, and the devil says, "You like that, eh? I tell you what I'll do. I'll give you that, but you'll owe me a favor." That's it? Yeah, that's all. Everybody comes in and walks out with that one thing that they really want for whatever reason. And the minute they walk in that shop, that thing has a hypnotic effect on them. They get fixated, and they can't walk out without it. And Devil leave it to you to see the rest of the story, because he uses each one of those people against each other to destroy the entire town. The devil can also be as cunning and as deceptive, and most of the time, that's how it starts. The cunning and deceptive way that the devil entices you into that web. But then the violence comes later. The force of will comes later, when you're compelled to do the things that you have to do because of the deal you struck. The will and the force of evil controls you. But God does not use those techniques. And if you look at this whole thing about the world, the way they try to mold your opinions about family, they try to sew you in with people who have all kinds of weird belief systems. They try to sew you in the same sack so that you can't escape, that they have an influence, a bearing upon your life. Even if it's your own flesh and blood, especially if it's your own flesh and blood. They try to sew you all together. That's not the will of God. People come into this world, and each one of us has a destiny. Ephesians 5:17. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. So you have somebody in your family, and they've gone out into the world, they're crazy now. They've come back from the world with the world in them, and they've got all these issues and problems and stuff that they bring back with them. And I'll tell you this, it's kind of like PTSD. They go out into the world affects them out there. They're damaged. And then they come back into the home, and now the damage is boom, boom, ah. And there's people in that environment. And those people start to react like pool balls being hit by a stick and bouncing off of each other. That's why PTSD is so destructive, because it doesn't just affect one person. It affects everyone around them. And it drains the life out of everyone who's having to deal with that. And we see movies about it. Yes, we should help those people. We should have sympathy for them. Believe it. But what if you can't help them? What if, because I heard this saying so many years ago, there are none so blind as those who will not see. What if they're locked into that experience that remade them in the world? Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God and what is good and acceptable and perfect. What happens if those people have lost that ability? Now they're in your world. They're bouncing around in your world. Boom, 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 boom. Yes, you have to be patient with them. Yes, you have to love them. But you don't have to let them bounce around in your world. You can. You want to let them bounce around in your world? You can do that. Or you can say, I can't have that bouncing in the world that I've just got to keep control over, because there are other people in there that will be affected by that bouncing ball. So you draw a line. Anybody ever had to draw a line with somebody who was bouncing off the walls? Everybody's had to do that at some level. And it's not that we're judging them because they're not doing the will of God, because they can't. They don't know how to. I had a dog. I'm not an animal person, although I've kind of become one. So we wanted to get a dog for my kids. And the first dog we got, it was like a feral dog. Found it out in the woods. Really good-looking animal. Kind of like a boxer. Not quite. Half boxer, half Rhodesian. But it was crazy. It had no ability to interact with humans. It was raw. It was rough. It chewed everything. We tried to take it to obedience classes. Yeah, as long as you got the right person there that will restrain it consistently, it would do what it was told to do. But if you weren't constantly restraining it and controlling it, it would go back to its feral state. Eating and chewing and clawing and barking and destructive. And it was hard because we felt that when you get an animal, you kind of feel like it's a part of your family. My wife was kind of broken up about it. I said, we can't keep this dog. We got to adopt it out. So we did. And we adopted it out to the right person because he put a shock collar on it. And he trained it with pain. It's not something in my wheelhouse. I just didn't want to spend my energy that way. This guy had a big farm and a lot of property. It's the same with people. It's the same with people. And I think that the dark side wants to subvert freedom. I think it wants you to tie you up. Like like a lifeguard that goes into the water to rescue someone that's drowning, who simply is splashing and tearing and panicking. Lifeguards let those people go. You know that, right? They have to, because they have to preserve their life. Policemen are the same way. You ever watch Live PD? Policemen are there to serve the public and try to help people, even the bad guys. But there are some bad guys that end up not being helpable. And that becomes the final confrontation. They try. I saw one last night. A man and woman were in a truck and they were just careening, destroying police cars, destroying. And they had the opportunity to shoot them both. But they didn't. They got them cornered, and then when they surrendered, they were passive. But there are times when people are not going to be passive. They're going to keep kicking and screaming and polluting and contaminating. I mean, we don't let weeds grow in our gardens, do we? Do we say, come on, weeds, you're as valuable as that other fruit that I'm growing, that food I'm going to put on my table? You weed out the weeds. I've always thought about weeds. What's the point of weeds? But that's something I'll have to ask God if I get there. 2 John 2:16 and 17. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes, and the pride in possessions, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. So what is this telling us about the things of life? And here's another interesting aspect of the whole, what is God's will? Because sometimes you acquire people. I know a lot of people have acquired other people. You take them in, you try to be good to them, you try to give them the love they never had before. My dad tells a story of a lady that used to work for him in Los Angeles, and her son was a petty criminal. He took him in, he tried to give him the love of a father, and he trusted him, but his dark side took over. and he stole from the organization. His mother had to put him in jail. Terrible. There he was. There he was. Had what he never had before. And it reminds me of Tarzan of Greystoke. You can take the man out of the jungle, but sometimes you can't take the jungle out of the man, or woman, or child. And this is what the devil wants to do. He wants to stop you from knowing God's will before you know it. It's a preemptive strike. The children are the vulnerable ones. And if you think about it, in our country today, we have the best prosperity of any time in known history. That enough people were able to make a choice about who would lead this country. So that tells you that even though the devil wants to stop everyone before they get to that point, God is greater. Because he will bring you around. If he wants you, he will bring you around. Against all odds. I know somebody like that. I was a bad kid. Not terrible. And he brought me around. And I know a lot of people that were brought around. It started for me when I was young. Very young. When I was 13, somebody handed me a joint. Before that, wet bars everywhere. Alcohol. 10, 11, 12 years old, I'm at these people's houses and the kids are drinking. The devil wants you, man. He wants you, ladies. He wants your kids. And once he's got them, how are they going to come back? How do they come back? Is it by your will? Is it by the force of anybody else's will? You heard of these things called interventions? Sometimes you can kind of deprogram somebody, but you got another set of programming. Remember Patty Hearst? Symbionese Liberation Army? She was kidnapped, forced to go on robberies with these crazy far leftists. They brainwashed her. And when she was released, and I'll never forget this, I saw it on 60 Minutes. They asked her, why did you break in and do bank robberies with these people? Were you brainwashed? Did they force you to do this? Here's what she said. She said, I would rather believe that I did it of my own free will. Let me start that again. Devil's trying to get me. She said, I would rather believe that I did it of my own free will than believe that I could be brainwashed. Wow. Wow. I mean, obviously she was under duress. They kept her in a closet. They told her they were going to kill her every couple of hours. Stockholm Syndrome. When you turn around, you embrace your captors. That's the devil's will. The devil will break you. He'll seduce you, break you, and use you in that broken state. Do not be conformed to this will. Do not be conformed to the world. The world has a will. The family has a will. It's not God. It is not God. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. You know, since I'm going to say 17 years old, I was pretty worldly by then. And then I started suffering the consequences. I got hurt very badly. Could have died a number of times. And finally, one day, after the three's a charm, right? The third episode, where I nearly drowned, I washed up on the shore when I was surfing, and I looked up into the sky, and I said, God, I don't want to live this way anymore. I would rather be dead. That's pretty serious. You hear me? And I don't know if it takes that for you, but it took it for me. God wanted me to live, and I had to acknowledge that. And what I think I was saying, without even knowing it, was, I want to die to that world that was killing me, that I was subject to, that I was a captive of. The emotions, the anger, the will that was involved, the deception, the lying. Devil wants you, especially if you're going to be somebody that can actually change the world. Because God can use you to do that. That's what God can do. But first you have to say, I don't want to live to this world anymore. I don't want to be a part of the world that is killing me. Like I did. In the sense that I knew I was it. I was at the end. Another accident, I wouldn't survive. I could see that. And I was only 18 years old. So I did start meditating. I started meditating. Actually, I was not even my 18th birthday. Because I knew that something was in there for me. And I'll tell you, my difficult experience of meditating, 3 long years. And in those days, all we had was records. So I'd put that record on. I'd start, and something would do this. Zip. How'd that happen? Start again. Zip. All right, that didn't work. Start again. What happened? Start again. It was the best sleep I ever had, but it wasn't what the intended result was. And then slowly, progressively, you have to understand, and I don't mean to mock people who come to God, so forgive me in advance. I found God. Praise Jesus. Those people get converted. It can happen. But, and sometimes it happens rapidly. I mean, like overnight. But for the average person, the daily grind is how you convert to the new person. You don't just convert overnight and then you wake up the next day and your life is blessed because you do everything right. You do everything right, one incident at a time. I saw that a long time ago. And I believe that's why it's hard for a lot of people to allow God's will to influence their life, because they want results. They want results. Who doesn't want results? So you go to a big church, 15,000 people, and you get saved in front of those 15,000 people. Those people watch you and you believe they have an expectation of you because you got saved. Are you serving God's will then? When 15,000 people saw you get saved, can you backslide now? You got this in the back of your head. These people watch me get saved, but I still got these impulses. What am I going to do? And then you sneak around. People get saved and they sneak around doing the things they were doing before. But they maintain the appearance to other people. They go to church, they have the fellowship, they say all the right things, but there's a secret life. Everybody got a secret life. At some level. Unless you don't. God's will. For all that is of this world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and pride in possessions is not from the Father, but from the world. That's hard to resist, the treasure. It's hard to resist, and I guess, first of flesh, second of spirit. We come into this world, we want the things of the world. It's very hard. I watch myself. I see an SRT Hellcat, and something says to me, you should do anything you can to get that. And I say, why? What for? What am I going to do with 800 horsepower? Am I going to drive the speed limit? Or am I going to drive reasonably? Why would I want 800 horsepower? I don't care. I don't care about it. And quite honestly, and this is not, I'm not being flip, but I've come to a new place. It's a plateau called I don't care. Where I look at the rest of the things of this world. Literally, anything and everything that could be in it. And I watch it tug at me. Because this is my personal journey. This is my journey. Me. This soul. My journey. And on that journey, you're going to have all kinds of information and disinformation. And I see it all pulling at me now. I didn't see it before. I'm not young anymore. So I've gotten to this place where I've kind of been there and done that stuff. And it doesn't stop pulling at you. But you're able to sit back and watch it and say, I don't care. My wife thinks, well, how can you not care? Because I'm kind of getting free of all that. God's will. And the world is passing away along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. And I'm going to tell you right now, no one on this earth can tell you, this is the will of God. No one can do that. Only God and His Son Jesus Christ can do that. That's why God exists. That's His job. Should not be you can be a messenger. You can be the greatest messenger there is. But you cannot tell people what the will of God is. You can't. Because then, what are you doing when you're not serving God? You're playing Him. And that is a trip. That is worse than the worst acid trip you can be on. Because you get filled with, what do I want to call it? A strange kind of pride. That you think that you're the one that can deliver that message. God doesn't want you to know what He knows. This is what happened in the Garden of Eden. You can eat that. The reason why He told you not to is because He doesn't want you to know what He knows. God said to Adam and Eve, of all the fruit in the garden you may eat, but of this one tree you may not. For in that moment you will know good and evil, and you will die. That is death. To think that you can liberate somebody by pretending to know the will of God is death. It's a death sentence. It's not your job. You can tell people the truth. That's what God wants you to do. Know the truth, and it shall make you free. If you see the truth, say the truth. See it and say it. Stand up for it. Because it's truth, but it's not your truth. You're not the message. You're the messenger. Messengers often get huge consequences and huge pushback. I'm reminded of the story of Job. No, it was Jonah. God told him, go to this kingdom and deliver this message for me. Jonah was scared, you-know-whatless. He thought they were going to kill him on the spot. This is why reading the Bible is so important. I never read that story in my life until 10 years ago. I thought, oh my gosh, what an incredible metaphor. God told him, go deliver the message. Your people are sinners and I want you to repent. Whoa. Talk about standing up for the truth. Not the messenger, not the message, the messenger. So he went and hid on the ship, and the ship encountered a storm so bad that they figured there was a curse on the ship. That's where he ended up in the belly of the whale, who delivered him to that kingdom. He went through all this stuff, and he finally went and told the king, and they repented. And even after that, he was still a doubter. I think it's instructive. I think it's important. The will of God is so pure. It has no human element in it. If it were human, it would not be the will of God. The truth is a different story because we're only human. And therefore we have to be able to incline ourselves to the truth, to deliver the truth. We have to be inclined toward it. But not the will. Not the will of God. It's a huge mistake. And, broad is the way that leads to destruction. And many go that way. But narrow is the path that leads to life. And few are those who find it. Broad is the way. It's the superhighway of zombies who think they're all doing the right thing. And there's no traffic jams on the superhighway of zombies. There isn't. It's wide open. Get on the superhighway and do, like Pinocchio. Go to Pleasure Island. Do whatever you want. Believe whatever you want. Think you're doing God's will. It doesn't matter because the superhighway is open that way. But narrow is the path that leads to life. Narrow. And that means you're paying attention. I've talked about this before. But you pay attention. You watch. You become a watcher, an observer. And you're less likely to be inclined to tell everybody what to do. I'm sitting here because I feel that I've been called to do this. I was saved from death to do this, to talk to you about the things that I see. I'm not doing anything else. I hope everyone gets better. I hope the world gets better. I hope my family gets better. But I'm on my own journey too. Just like you are. All of you are on your own journey. And if you're entangled with other people that are trying to hold you back, you got to focus. You got to remain focused on what's important. Okay? There's 1,000 tendrils, invisible threads, like invisible tentacles that are holding on to you. Thousands and thousands. Remember Gulliver's Travels? When he was on the Isle of Lilliput and the Lilliputians had him tangled in all these ropes and threads, and finally he was able to get out of them. He wasn't subject to those threads. Neither are you. Those threads are not your destiny. As a matter of fact, interestingly, there's a new, and I've talked about this too, the new science of epigenetics. And I read this several years ago, that literally your gene expression can change 30 to 40,000 times a day. Does that boggle your mind? What it means is that if you meditate, you can change your gene expression. So instead of the inevitable, what they say, well, it's your genetics, they want you to believe. Those scientists of old want you to believe that you were a prisoner of genetic destiny. But it's not true, and it never has been. You can change, and not even by any force of your own will. This is God's code. He put this in us. This intelligent designer put in us the ability to change our genetic destiny so that we don't die of certain diseases and we don't encounter certain conditions. It changes before that happens. Now, I find myself very lucky to have started meditating when I did. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. I would be dead. I would have been dead a long time ago. I would have been just another throwaway, another disposable. And it's sad because every human being has value, no matter where they are, no matter what they do. This is the world that God created where every human being counts, but some do more than others. And it's a choice that they make. It's a choice you make. So, when it comes to God's will, I want you to start cutting those threads, those invisible threads, and start feeling free to have your own unique, and the word that came to me was sovereign relationship with your Creator, with Jesus Christ. No man has the right to intercede for God or Jesus. They can tell you the truth, and you can know the truth, and the truth can make you free. And many people have said to me over the last 3 decades, "Oh, you said something and it changed me." I said, "I did not do anything of the sort. God did that." I don't know what it would have been. How could I know what I said to somebody when they said, "Well, you said something that changed my life"? I don't know that. They know that. But it wasn't me. I'm just a speaker. The sound comes out. I stand up, I go out, and I'm just like everybody else. But I am focused on the narrow path. God's will occur to you when you're on that narrow path, when you have the patience to be quiet long enough to sit and wait. I waited 3 years to even begin experiencing the result or the effect of being quiet. I had to be tested for 3 years. And I wondered, when is this going to have an effect on me? I did become more aware. I watched the temptations of the world. So by the time I was 21, when I turned 21, I didn't go out drinking. Didn't want to. But I was still me. I just didn't have any desire to do that. So when I got to that end of that dark tunnel that I was in the world of the flesh, that ultimately made me, first of flesh, second of spirit, the day I came out of that tunnel, 3 years almost, I don't know how many to the day, but I could see at the end of that tunnel light. I was in a dark tunnel. Every time I'd close my eyes, it was black. And then one day there was a dot of light. And every day then, for years after that, it got a little bit bigger. And a little bit bigger. Until one day it happened. Didn't expect it. Didn't even know what to do. But I was like in a snowstorm of light. It was like snowing, like the Matrix was coming down, and out of the darkness it was not dark anymore. There's no darkness in my mind anymore. When I close my eyes, I see snow. I see light. Just falling. And I see the thoughts. I'm aware of the urges. I see it. And I just watch it. And I think that the ultimate expression of God's will is for you to know the truth that sets you free.